In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro Moros called for the lifting of the U.S.-imposed sanctions as the main claim of the international conference on the political process in Venezuela. The president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, continues his Europe tour. The president visited the Portuguese parliament to participate in the commemoration of the coronation revolution. And Sudan goes under a 72-hour ceasefire after 10 days of fighting that left hundreds dead and provoked a massive exodus. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The Venezuelan president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, called for the lifting of the sanctions imposed by the U.S. as the main demand of the international conference on the political process in Venezuela. The head of state stated that the main demand of the Caribbean country is the full lifting of the sanctions imposed by Washington regarding the meeting to be held on April 25th in the city of Bogotá. In this context, President Maduro said the country is looking forward to this international conference called by the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro.
We do not accept anything less from that conference in Bogotá, the lifting of all sanctions so that Venezuela may have commercial freedom, financial freedom, economic freedom of its regular activity. In order to be able to recover everything that needs to be recovered in the economic, productive, and social fields, so that blackmail, restraint, coercion, permanent aggression on our economy, on our social life ends. The lifting of all sanctions on Venezuela, all of them. We do not accept less. We do not compromise for less. Lifting all the sanctions.
The Supreme Federal Court of Brazil began on Monday the prosecution and the arrest of more than 200 people linked to the coup acts of last January the 8th, when followers of the former President Jair Bolsonaro stormed the National Congress and other government facilities. This is the second indictment process analyzed by the Superior Court, since the first one had about 100 names, and most of the judicial officials already voted to indict them as guilty. Among the charges for which they will have to answer are armed criminal association, violent abolition of the democratic rule of law, coup d'etat, qualified damage against the union's patrimony, in addition to the deterioration of demolished property. In total, 1,390 perpetrators were denounced by the Attorney General's office for their participation in the attacks by radical groups, perpetrators who were dissatisfied with Bolsonaro's defeat. On Monday in Uruguay, unions began a 24-hour general strike and a mobilization as measures of the inter-union plenary of workers against the approval of the pension reform promoted by the government. The president of the inter-union plenary of workers, Marcelo Abdala, announced that the measures were unanimously resolved by the executive secretariat of the organization and affirmed that the concentration will take place on Tuesday around 3 p.m. local time around the Legislative Palace. He also pointed out that the reform is a concealed fiscal adjustment since it was born criticizing an alleged deficit in the Social Security Bank and other institutions. However, instead of improving the form of financing, it ends up cutting rights. Finally, the union leader indicated that in the reform, the only beneficiary is the financial capital and profit. On Tuesday, the candidates for the general elections in Paraguay held their respective campaign rallies ahead of the voting day on April 30th. On Sunday, 4.7 million Paraguayans will vote to elect the new president and vice president of the nation for the 2023-2028 term. In this sense, presidential candidates held their campaign rallies in the capital. On one hand, candidates of the ruling Colorado party, Santiago Peña and Pedro Ayllana, met with a large group of women members of the party who gave their support to the candidates. On the other, Efraín Alegre and Soledad Núñez, who lead the Coalition for New Paraguay, launched their government plan at the Crowley Plaza Hotel in Cerro Corá Street. On Monday in Argentina, at least 6 people, including a policeman, were injured in a powerful explosion at a house in Buenos Aires town of Santos Lugares, apparently caused by a gas leak, according to a local media report. According to witnesses, the explosion was followed by a fire completely extinguished by the far-fighting forces that went to the 3 de Febrero district of the Argentine capital. It was reported that the incident occurred after a gas leak was being repaired and affected a law office and several adjoining houses, as well as some vehicles which lost their windows due to the expansive wave. The police and firefighters managed to evacuate the residents of nearby buildings. Fire Chief Ramon Pared declared the event was due to a lot of accumulated gas and remarked that there was already a smell in the block, so the firefighters had already set up an operation there. United States President Joe Biden on Tuesday formally announced that he is running for re-election in 2024. The U.S. head of state, who will be 86 at the end of the second term, is betting his first-term legislative achievements and more than 50 years of experience in Washington that will count for more than concerns over his age. Experts said the President Biden faces a smooth path to winning his party's nomination, with no serious Democratic rivals. However, he is still set for a hard-fought struggle to retain the presidency in a bitterly divided nation. Likewise, analysts have stated that to prevail again, the U.S. president will need the alliance of young voters and black voters, particularly women, along with blue-collar Midwesterns and disaffected Republicans who helped him win in 2020. And after Biden's announcement of his re-election bid, U.S. citizens voiced their concerns regarding his intentions to gain a second term and the possible outcome of the 2024 polls.
Well, I saw the headline, and it's not surprising. I think usually with presidents, when they complete their first term, they still go on for the second term.
I think he can be in fine health. I certainly am in fine health. But mentally, I'm certainly not as acute as I was 20 years ago. And there's no way he is either. I realize he's surrounded by really intelligent people, but nonetheless, I think it's time for a younger person to take over that job.
As an American, it's oftentimes a little depressing to see that our presidential candidates, we don't have more breadth, so to speak. But, it is what it is. And I think you're right. I think Trump will be the Republican nominee next year, so we'll see what happens, and looking forward to it.
Let's take a short break. But first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. The President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, continues his tour of Europe. On Tuesday, the President visited the Portuguese Parliament to participate in the commemoration of the Carnation Revolution. With his ceremony on Tuesday morning, Lula concluded his visit to Portugal after meeting over the weekend with the President of Portugal, Marcelo Rebelo, and the Prime Minister, Antonio Costa. Meanwhile, Lula arrives in Spain on Tuesday, where he is scheduled to meet with business persons and Spanish trade unions, and on Wednesday, he will be received by the President of the government, Pedro Sánchez, and King Felipe VI. This is Lula's first trip to Europe in this third term, in which he has maintained an intense international activity that included visits to Argentina, Uruguay, the United States, China, and the United Arab Emirates. The Italian Coast Guard confirmed that over 1,000 asylum seekers arrived on the southern island of Lampedusa on 35 boats that set out from Tunis, with a journey during which 3 of the vessels sank. Coast Guard officials said that between Sunday and Monday, they provided aid to a total of 35 boats, carrying over 1,000 people, all of whom disembarked on the island. During its rescue operations, the Coast Guard and the Border Police rendered emergency aid to 3 vessels that were sinking. Britain. The first vessel in difficulty was located in Italy's search and rescue zone, a mishap in which 3 of the people on board are missing. Aid was also rendered to a second sinking boat in the Maltese zone, with 34 people being rescued but 20 others remaining unaccounted for. When authorities responded to the third shipwreck, they found only the lifeless body of one person in the vicinity. On Tuesday, the death toll after twin blasts at a police station in northwestern Pakistan rose to 17 and left 70 people wounded. According to Swat District's police chief Shafiullah, among the casualties were 9 policemen, 3 citizens, and 5 under custody suspected terrorists. He also said that several police officers were among those wounded, out of which 8 are critical. In the meantime, preliminary investigations revealed that the explosions at the Counter-Terrorism Department police station in Swat District on Monday were caused by a short circuit at the ammunition store, which caught fire. So far, no group has claimed responsibility for the blasts, which take place amidst a rise in terrorism-related incidents in the country since the Taliban seized power in neighboring Afghanistan in August 2021.
When the explosion happened, we arrived here and saw that the situation was very bad, and ambulance and police began to arrive and the rescue operation began.
In China, the Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei is in Taiwan as part of a 4-day visit at a time of growing tensions between Taiwan and Beijing. The government of Guatemala, together with Belize and Paraguay, are the only Latin American countries holding diplomatic relations with Taiwan after Honduras broke its ties with the island last March 26. Giammattei expressed his solid friendship with Taiwan in a speech before the legislature and called on the international community to respect Taiwan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. For its part, China's foreign ministry said the government of Guatemala should not assess what it described as separatist attempts by the Taiwanese authorities and reiterated that the One China principle is an internationally accepted concept under universal consensus of the international community. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced on Tuesday that his country will withdraw from the International Criminal Court. The South African leader's pronouncement came during the reception of his Finnish counterpart, Sauli Vainamo Niinisto. Ramaphosa detailed that the stance was caused by the recent announcement that an arrest warrant was issued for Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is expected to attend the BRICS Group Summit in South Africa in August. In 2017, the African National Congress decided to abandon the Roman Statute after the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for the arrest of former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. Subsequently, that determination was abandoned and now resumed because of the stance of the international organization against President Putin, which in several countries is seen as a biased, double standard, and politically motivated stance. And South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said the decision, taken after a meeting of the African National Congress over the weekend, was largely due to perceived unfair treatment by the court of certain countries.
The African National Congress has taken that decision, that it is prudent that South Africa should pull out of the ICC, largely because of the manner in which the ICC has been seen to be dealing with these types of problems.
On Tuesday in Sudan, local media reported tense calms in Khartoum after the beginning of a 72-hour ceasefire between two generals disputing the leadership and the power of the country. Also on Tuesday, there was almost no gunfire or explosions in the Sudanese capital after the armed forces of Sudan and the paramilitary rapid support forces agreed to a 72-hour ceasefire mediated by the United States. Both warring parties had repeatedly announced in recent days that they agreed to stop the fighting, but each time they accused the other of breaking the truce. The temporary ceasefire comes as fighting that erupted on April 15th has left 427 people dead and more than 3,700 wounded, according to the UN agencies and other governments of the region. And join us now because we go live to Bogotá, Colombia, where the International Conference on the Political Process in Venezuela is underway. Let's see.
Inicio, se dirige a ustedes el señor presidente de la República, doctor Gustavo Petro Urreco.
Bueno. Doy un saludo aquí muy especial.
I greet everyone present
in
this conference.
Prime
Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph
Gonsalves, nuestro jefe de despacho presidencial, Laura Camila Sarabia, el ministro de Relaciones Exteriores aquí presente,
the Foreign Minister
Álvaro Leiva,
to all foreign ministers of different countries that are joining us today, ambassadors, diplomatic envoys, and representatives of international organisms present today. We have delegations and diplomatic delegations, foreign ministers from Argentina, Santiago Cafero, from Brazil, Ambassador Celso Luis, we have Gisela Maria Figueiredo, from Bolivia, we have Rogelio Maita, Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bolivia. From Chile, we have Alberto. Maria Inés Ruz is Chile's ambassador to Colombia. From Mexico, we don't have Marcelo Ebrard here, but Efraín Guadarrama, with the General Director of Regional Organism, Patricia Ruiz, Mexican Ambassador to Colombia. From Honduras, we have Eduardo Enriquez, Foreign Affairs Secretary. From Barbados,
Primera Ministra de Barbados, abogada. Eso está muy bonito aquí en español, decir mi amor. ¿Dónde están nuestros? Bueno, en San Vicente y las Granadinas.
From St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves. From the United States,
Canadá con Michel Grant.
From Canada, we have Michel Grant.
Adjunto para las Américas del Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores, Marianique Tremblay, embajadora de Canadá en Colombia. Carol Saint Louis, consejera
We have Carol Saint Louis,
Exteriores de Canadá.
Representing Europe, we have Francisco André, Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs from Portugal, Juan Fernández Trijo, Secretary of State for Ibero-America and the Caribbean from Spain, Dag Nylander is the head of the facilitating team from Norway,
James Turis, en inglés, Reino Unido, director del Departamento de América Latina del Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores. Bezpeklivan Sun, embajadora de Turquía.
Turkey's ambassador.
Suegraf, embajadora de Alemania y gran ciclista, aquí presente. Romain Nadal, embajador de Francia en Venezuela. Lindiwe Maseko,
the South African ambassador.
De África, que también se hace aquí presente. Bueno, medios de comunicación.
And the media also present here.
Nacionales, internacionales, en general a todos los asistentes de esta conferencia internacional.
And to all present here in this conference, who are committed to defense the democratic values and human rights and peace. Italy is also present here.
Italia, no, en Italia casi no nací allí, pero casi muero.
I wasn't born in Italy, but I almost died there.
Joseph
Borrell from the European Union,
con el cual hemos hablado mucho de varios
to whom we
temas.
have spoken at length of different subjects.
Esta conferencia pues tiene muchas expectativas.
This conference has many expectations, and sometimes when we have these high expectations and hopes,
La gran novela europea a veces puede generar también grandes decepciones.
and sometimes it can also lead to great disappointments. I hope this is not the latest, and I hope these expectations become realities. There are two great processes in this part of Latin America. The peace process in Colombia and the dialogue process in Venezuela. In a certain way, both countries, we depend on each other's luck. And some of you we already visit
de esta casa histórica. Allí dormía Manuelita Sáenz con Bolívar.
Where Manuela Sáenz shared his bedroom with Bolívar. As Eduardo Galeano said, and I quote, there were dates and nights of love and war. And that's why in that same many room there were too many passions and pleasures.
Los amantes acostados en esa cama. Pensando en el nuevo día.
Where they thought about the new day.
A Bolívar se le decía bailarín del nuevo día porque le gustaba.
Bolívar was called the dancer of the new day.
Era atraído por el amor y la
in a certain way, he was drawn by love and passion.
Nosotros en Latinoamérica nos atrae.
That all of us in Latin America that happens the same way.
Lo intentaron matar.
But they tried to kill them in that same room.
El libertador de 5 naciones,
the liberator of 5 nations.
Sus ideas, guerrero, como el que más,
he was a warrior.
Y amante. Allí pudo encontrar su muerte, asesinado.
He was murdered in that same room.
Si fue asesinado o no, pero
and in the end,
se escapó en esa ventana.
We doesn't know if it was true or not. He ran away to freedom, and his love made him possible to do it. This is a story that gather part of the countries present here. Manuela was from Ecuador, and she dies poor after Bolívar left. And Bolívar was from Venezuela, and this is a place in Colombia.
Colombia, Venezuela, una sola nación. A veces algunos sentimos
Sometimes there are some we feel a little nostalgic
porque sería una gran nación,
because it will be a great nation, powerful, as Bolivar dreamed,
con un pie en el Atlántico,
with a
en el
foot on the
Caribe y
Atlantic
otro
and
pie
in the
en
Caribbean,
el Pacífico,
and another one in the
con el
Pacific,
Canal de Panamá de por medio, con la riqueza de ser,
with the
si
wealth
hubieran estado juntas, la mayor potencia
of
de
being
la
the greatest
biodiversidad del mundo. Al
biodiversity
final, la
in the
biodiversidad
world,
es el producto del amor también.
and biodiversity is the product, it's a result of love as well.
Cruza sus diversos problemas,
This
cruza
great
por
nation
sus
that share
ansiedades, por sus
with us
búsquedas,
its problems,
por un camino de todas maneras
to look
común.
for a way, a common way.
Y este salón entonces junto a donde
And in
Bolívar
this
se
hall,
entregó al amor y se escapó de la muerte, bien puede servir de escenario
it can also serve
para que podamos encontrar
as a place for us to find solutions.
América Latina, los latinoamericanos,
Latin
lo sabemos,
American
debe ser reconocido por
must be
quienes
recognized.
desde más lejos llegan aquí. Es la región más desigual del mundo.
Latin America is the most unequal region in the world.
Quizás por un problema que tiene que ver con la
Maybe
política
for
antidrogas,
a problem with politics related
no
to
hay
drugs.
guerras aquí,
There are no
realmente.
wars here, actually.
Nuestros países, con algunas excepciones en la
Our countries,
historia,
with
han buscado
some
vivir
exceptions,
en paz.
have looked for peace.
Nosotros no conocemos la historia guerrera de Europa.
We don't know wars that happen in Europe.
No conocemos realmente de las grandes tiranías.
We don't know about
Hemos nacido
great
con la
tyrannies.
idea común
We
de
were born with the
democracia.
common idea of sharing peace,
Democracia, libertad,
democracy, freedom,
han sido hitos, conceptos comunes
have
en
been
todas las
common
Américas.
concepts in Latin America.
Democracia, libertad y paz.
Democracy, freedom, and peace.
Parte de nuestra historia tiene que ver con ese común
Part of our
destino,
history,
con esa
it's
raíz
related to this
comunes.
common destiny.
A pesar de que aquí han habido dictaduras,
Despite we have dictatorships,
destrucción de derechos humanos,
destruction of human
genocidios
rights.
indudables. Es una región que se marca en una ambivalencia de la cual hay que escapar. Somos la sociedad más desigual del mundo.
We are the most unequal society in the world, or
Unos
Latin
más,
America.
otros menos. Y eso ha hecho que unas fuerzas de izquierda
And these have
libertarias,
helps
una
that
tensión
some forces
política
from the left
casi que insurgente haya aparecido en todo nuestro
has arisen in
continente
our continent
para buscar igualdad.
to look for
Ese ha
equality.
sido su búsqueda,
It has
ese
been
ha
its
sido
purpose,
su criterio.
its criteria,
De niños, de niñas, muchos latinoamericanos en
since
esta y en
many
pasadas
Latin American were
generaciones han
very
querido sacrificarse
have been
incluso
sacrificed
por la lucha por la igualdad,
to fight
la
for
libertad,
freedom, for equality,
por la democracia,
for
por
democracy,
un mejor vivir, por un mundo
for a
mejor.
better life and for a better world.
Yo hago parte de esa corriente.
I'm part of this group.
No estamos ocultando cartas.
We are not hiding
Ese
our
ha sido
agenda.
nuestro destino, igual
This
que
has been our destiny,
otras corrientes políticas
as well as
han
other
tratado de
political
detener esos
movements
cambios, han sido más
that have tried to stop
conservadoras,
these changes.
han mirado las
They have been more
perspectivas de América
conservative
Latina
and denied
desde
the
otro
perspective of Latin America
lugar, desde otra percepción.
from another perception.
Indudablemente ser la sociedad más desigual
And
socialmente del mundo
without a doubt,
arroja un pueblo
being this
pobre
unequal
que tiene
society, we
muchas
have poor people
aspiraciones
that have many
en el derecho a la
expectations.
vida y a la dignidad, y desde otras perspectivas grandes capitales que a veces no parecieran entender lo que pasa con esa pobrecía, lo que pasa con esa desigualdad. La pregunta es, ¿podemos
The
convivir
question is, we can
o tenemos que
share
guerrear
our life, or
como hasta ahora ha sido?
do we have to keep fighting?
Y la propuesta que nosotros hemos intentado
And the
hacer
proposal that we bring
es
today
que podemos convivir
is that we can
si
share
miramos las cosas de manera diferente.
our community if we look
Si nos
at
podemos
things
entender,
different, if
si
we
se
can
puede
understand
abrir un
each other,
diálogo democrático,
if we can
si
open a
es
democratic
posible
dialogue,
confiar en unos y en otros,
if we
y
can
en
trust,
unas y en
if we
otras,
can trust
de
each
tal
other
manera que podamos profundizar
in a way that we
un proyecto
can keep
democrático.
in a democratic I think the democratic process in Latin America can be deeper than what we have seen so far. If we have the capacity to understand each other, sometimes we fought over pride. The person who wanted to kill Bolivar in that room maybe wanted to do so. There were not different projects with the killer and the victim in that room. Maybe if they have the dialogue, they will understand. And our destiny would have been different. Maybe passions and ego of the moment. Those egos maybe just by talking, an act that is specific to democracy, just to talk, to dialogue, we have been able to share a different destiny. For the 1970s, a liberal generation with many men and a few women. They tried to build a pact, an international pact, in the 1969, 1771. This was a pact of the Americas, the American Convention of Human Rights. Human rights deal with individuals inside the concept of representative democracy. Every country in Latin America signed, except Cuba, that was not invited to this conference. From Alaska to the Patagonia, the presidents at that time signed the agreement, and the Congress of the different republics enacted this conference as a law. They talk about political rights. They establish that political rights are human rights. They establish that no political rights can be removed to any citizen by judge. They established liberal rights. In 1973, it's American Convention of Human Rights. Because a general bombed presidential palace. The first socialist president chosen by its people. This was a popular decision that was sunk with bombings and murders and destroyed the American Convention. From there, Uruguay, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil, and all Latin America was filled with dictatorships. Colombia as well, and Venezuela. There were no military in the presidency in Colombia, but the same practices carried out in Argentina and Uruguay were carried out in our country. They tried to extinguish the flame of liberal freedoms that call for freedom no matter what. Civil rights were removed to millions of people just simply because they demanded just social justice and freedom. And to the north,
nos levantamos en armas.
We rise in arms.
A mí mucha gente en las calles de Bogotá.
There are many people in the street of Bogota have asked me if I was a girl. We rise in arms against injustice. As a young man, I saw many of my friends die. Very beautiful women that simply thought about a better world, and they died in the streets of Bogota, in the attacks, in prisons, and torture. Liberal rights didn't exist, and that document signed by all presidents and enacted as law by the Congresses
en el sistema interamericano de derechos humanos fue pura retórica y discurso,
just a rhetoric,
hundidos por los tanques y los fusiles. Y pasaron años.
There were many years after that,
que desde 1998
until that 1998,
lo que llamamos la primavera latinoamericana.
The Latin America Spring rise up again. Dictatorships were overthrown. In some cases, that many people decided to fight for concepts of freedom, with some mistakes. But in many countries, there were people fighting for justice. They have 30 years have passed since that. And the democratic ideals are still present in our continent. Several representatives
izquierdas tratando de tumbar presidentes y los presidentes son de derecha. Una ruptura aún
there has been a rupture
del sistema interamericano de derechos humanos
of the human rights systems
que trata de recomponerse, pero que
that try to rebuild itself but cannot hold itself still. And the question I ask is Latin America coming back to the 1970s? Our inability to share our differences will carry us once again towards dictatorships. We have to see many people torture and disappear with no human rights. Or can we understand each other to establish alternatives and possibilities, sharing political projects in a group of nations in a more democratic way, with more freedom and more peace. The Ibero-American Convention from 1972 can be reached moving forward with rights for women, with rights for nature and social rights. Or are we going back to dictatorship times, to war times? This room that was one time a loving room. I believe that the work that we're carrying out today will define this, to share and to decide if we're going to love or to war. If we have to use the windows to escape or to... The history of Latin America is in our hands, in the hands of our people. What is happening in Venezuela and what is happening in Colombia and in Ecuador and in several countries of Latin America, and what is happening in Peru when indigenous people are dying, what is been happening in Bolivia for many years, and in Brazil, in Honduras, in Paraguay, can decide a path to war and democratic destruction, or we can rebuild a path for peace and democracy. This room, its historical energies and your presence, is to look forward to reconstruction, the democratic reconstruction of Latin America, to a more equal society and free society. The human rights systems is the proposal from Colombia, is a recommendation that has to be strengthened as our great democratic pact. I asked the Venezuelan government that decide to enter it once again to the inter-American human rights system, and we can find the way for a better democracy. In Mexico, there have been established processes that go back and forth to achieve electoral guarantees and an election calendar. And the Venezuelan society doesn't want sanctions, because sanctions have made difficult the life for the Venezuelan people. The people suffering from starvation, running away from hunger, running away from misery. Latin America cannot be a space for sanctions. It has to be a space for freedom and a space for democracy. In our countries and in the case of Venezuela, we have to share this common path to establish an agenda for elections, so the Venezuelan people can choose with freedom and without pressures.
Ojalá todo comenzara por el reingreso de Venezuela al sistema interamericano de derechos humanos, porque al final somos los latinoamericanos.
Because in the end, we Latin American are the ones who decide if we go to democracy or to war and confrontation. And Venezuelans, nobody else, that can decide, they have to decide freely their future. To enter the inter-American system of human rights will be, in my opinion, a great achievement. To establish a system without a doubt will be a great achievement. And to establish a timeline to lift the sanctions will also be a great achievement. I wish that in the end, the great achievements, that wishes and hopes of the Venezuelan people become a reality. That they don't be a people that is able to be free, that can share their decisions without foreign interventions, to take decisions against their will, and nobody inside their countries to pressure them so their decisions. So our recommendations, we hope that will be well received from the opposition and from the government, but above all, from the population and from the Venezuelan people, and the people who want to live in peace, in democracy, and in freedom, with many days with love and with no days with a war. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your words.
de la Conferencia Internacional sobre el Proceso Político en Venezuela. Gracias a los medios de comunicación que nos acompañaron de manera presencial y a quienes siguieron esta transmisión. Feliz día.
And we were watching live the international conference on the political process in Venezuela that took place in Bogotá, Colombia. The President, Gustavo Petro, in the opening remarks, highlighted the historical ties that serve as common foundation for South American nations and the struggles the region faces. Also, some of the efforts of the current Colombian government in mediating between Venezuela's government and the oppositions, as well as Western powers. We have come to the end, like this, of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.